We have a 1955 Buick Dynaflow transmission we're going to be doing some pressure testing on. A couple things I wanted to point out before we start is that I have made an adapter in the front of the torque converter so you can drive it with a drill, electric drill. And we're not going to be getting it up to a speed of idle so that we probably won't see much shaft movement. Another item here is we have our gauge set, and we have our front pump and reverse. We have our drive high accumulator, our low accumulator, our rear pump, and our stator. I've also used the template in the service manual to make a little quadrant so we can be sure we're in the correct gear when we're making our tests. I also tapped in a little lube pressure gauge into our cooler line so we can observe our cooling pressure or lube pressure. Let's get started. The first test we're going to do is the front pump test. We're going to be looking at a pressure of 90 to 100 psi on the front pump gauge and also on the rear pump gauge. We'll be looking at about 15 to 20 psi on our lubrication gauge. Our next test is going to be in drive, and we're looking for approximately 100 psi, 90 to 100 psi, and we're going to have pressures on our front pump, our drive high accumulator gauge there. We're going to have pressures on our rear pump. We're going to have pressure on our stator, and we should also have lubrication pressure. Now I'm going to repeat the test, and I'm going to move the kickdown lever for passing gear, which will change our stator pressure back to 0, and that would be the high angle. Our next test is going to be low range, and we're going to be looking at a pressure of 180 to 200 psi. We're going to have pressures on our front pump, our low accumulator, our rear pump, and our lube pressure. Our next test is going to be reverse. We're looking at our front pump gauge, which is also our reverse gauge. We should be looking at 200 psi or 180 to 200 psi. We should also have some lube pressure. The last test here is to test the rear pump, and I will be turning the output shaft counterclockwise from the rear, and I will show pressure on the rear pump. I'm doing this with by hand with a speed wrench. Okay, we're going to do a running test of the transmission showing all the pressures as I shift through the gears. We're going to be starting out in neutral, going to drive to low, reverse, and then back again.